Aloha and thanks for tuning in here to our very first episode of Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. I'm Ryan Kalesuji, joined by Yunji Denise, and we are so excited to launch this show that really aims to take a deep dive into the issues and topics that are making headlines in our community. And it's really a way to engage you, the viewers, directly with some of our top leaders and lawmakers.
Yeah, what makes this show a little bit different than your typical newscast is that it really is a two-way street. So we want you to log on to Facebook right now while you're watching. Of course, you're welcome to keep watching on television, but also watch us online and send in your questions for our guest. And Ryan, today we've got a good one.
That's right. Before our first episode, we wanted to start directly at the top. Joining us here in studio is Governor Josh Green. Of course, there is a lot to talk about with what's happening on Maui. A lot of information, a lot of updates continuing to come up. We're going to get the latest from the governor.
Yeah, and a lot of developments also when it comes to his affordable housing initiative. Nani Medeiros, of course, announcing her resignation. His thoughts on that, who's coming next in that job, and a lot of other issues facing the state. Spotlight Now starts now.
And Ryan Kalesuji, connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands, going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
We're about a month out from the wildfires. At this point in time, what is the priority and what are you focusing on right now?
Well, thank you for that question. Today's day 35, right? So yes, a month and 4 days since the catastrophic fire. We're continuing to focus on ways to help people heal. And the most important thing we're doing right now to help people heal is to get them resources, specifically housing. We did move within 2 weeks thousands of people, in fact, over 8,000 people into hotel rooms and Airbnbs. But now we got to get people into a much more permanent housing situation. And our goal is, and we will achieve this, is to get all of those who need housing into about 18 months worth of stable housing. That means converting a ton of Airbnbs from short-term rentals into long-term rentals. That's a really important thing because housing as a stability measure is probably most important to people after losing their homes. In addition to that, of course, there is financial support that has to be found. And day and night, we're working on every different part of this response. Now, we continued for the first month to try to find those who we'd lost. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But as we move past that period, now it's finding enough ways to keep people alive economically so they can take care of their loved ones, their kids, their parents. So we've announced a lot of grants. Let me dive into some of that right now. So in addition to housing, and we can unpack that more for the 8,000 plus people, we're going to be giving $30,000 grants to over 3,000 families. That's from TANF monies. That's Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. I adjusted the rules this morning to make it more available to anyone who was displaced. That will mean that people are going to get checks in the next 2 weeks for $30,000 to help them pay first and last into this 18 months. The 18 months will be covered, of course, by FEMA and those kind of resources. In addition to that, if they don't qualify directly for state funds, we have humanitarian funds, and that's a partnership that we have with the American Red Cross and with the Hawaii Community Foundation, who have been just extraordinary. We need to get everybody into a place where they can survive now this intermediate period as we begin to think about rebuilding. So that's what's on my mind day and night right now. Lots more to share about those things, though.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what you said there when it comes to the TANF money. Will people be getting a $30,000 check all at once? And how when you said you opened up eligibility, what do you mean?
So normally this TANF money, of which we have over $400 million right now set aside, which we've set aside for many years, normally that would just go to people in extreme need, and it's usually families. We needed to expand that a little bit so that, say someone is the child of workers that were just in Hawaii temporarily and then they had their child here, or they were COFA, compact-free association individuals. We want to make sure that they can get money. So we're working all of these details out. I do expect it to be a large check If it suits people better, we might split it in two and separate it 1 month at a time so that some of that money can be saved till the next month. But we're going to trust people that they have needs. A lot of people, of course, lost their vehicles. They still need to drive to work. They have to pay for their clothing. They're replacing everything if they don't have insurance. So there's that. And then beyond that, there's a lot of relationships that we have, for example, with the celebrity class. Those individuals like The Rock and Oprah and Shep Gordon and all those people are just being very generous. And so I wish everyone would just take a deep breath and appreciate generosity for what it is. When that generosity occurs, they are going to be doing monthly checks, and we're going to be matching that essentially with these two programs. So we're hopeful that they will raise well over $100 million. I'm going to bring in, well, it's first $100 million of TANF, then there's another $5 million of a kind of a separate category of TANF for those who had different citizen status, and then there's Hawaii Community Foundation monies coming in from the Maui Strong. All of those monies make it possible to get, some stability in life. The heartbreak is it doesn't bring back any of the loved ones that we lost, but people are very incredible in their resiliency, and I think that this is what is necessary so that not just they can do okay, but so that the rest of the state feels that we're taking care of one another. There's other grants that we'll talk about probably more. There's grants for businesses. There's going to be lots of resources from FEMA. I mean, lots and lots of resources, but this is what the state can do in the immediate short term.
And so these are specifically for those individuals who have been displaced and all the, the various needs that they may have. But when looking at the overall infrastructure needs that will take to rebuild some of the areas of Kula and Lahaina, where is that money coming from? I mean, is that a separate pot of the state that needs to be poured into that? I mean, because there's going to be a lot of infrastructure costs that are going to be needed.
Yes. So a lot of those monies are going to come from reconstruction and FEMA dollars. Now, there's definitely going to be a significant amount of resource that comes straight from the state. That's why we have rainy day funds. We have $1.5 billion, forgive me, in the rainy day fund right now. Eventually, we will use some of that money. All of these monies are actually before that comes to pass. Now, I've had meetings with pretty much every top government official known to man in the last 35 days, from the president through Congress, yesterday to the Secretary of Energy. For example, yesterday we got $95 million from the Department of Energy. I was very lucky to meet with Secretary Granholm, former governor of Michigan, very good person. She brought that essentially a check for $95 million to help us do resiliency on our grid. We're going to need to move a lot of lines underground. We're going to have to build new generators and transformers. We're going to, over time, seek very large amounts of money from the federal government to, in my world, bring down the risk. So we want to put all of the wires that are vulnerable underground over time. That's a $2 billion project across the state. So these are some of the things that we're going to, aspire to do over, many years. But right now, yes, infrastructure is going to be replaced. Housing is going to be a huge replacement. Now, the houses that were gone, there's about 3,000 structures, 3,200 structures that are damaged beyond repair. They're going to have to be replaced. Some people will have insurance. About 1,000 people seem to have insurance. About 2,000 people appear not to have full insurance. When there's uncompensated structures that have to be redone, like insurance doesn't live up to it, that's the place where FEMA ultimately steps in. That's a little bit of a longer timetable. That's more likely in the second year. There'll be 120 days of public meetings. This, because I was with the HUD Deputy Secretary on this matter. 120 days of meetings. We will help guide Maui, but Maui and the people of Lahaina and the people from Kula and everywhere else are going to have to tell us what they want. I know that that's been a topic on social media. I will tell you it's not true. It's nonsense. Anything that is going to be rebuilt really should come from the heart of the people of Maui. I'm just trying to go and make sure I get all the resources I can, and it all goes to those who have suffered. But when you're talking about building, say, a wider road that may be necessary for extra fire trucks, or if you're talking about, goodness knows, just straight up housing and grading, we expect FEMA to help us with that, and also, of course, HUD.
I'm monitoring these Facebook comments, and thank you to those of you who are writing in. We really appreciate it. There are a number of questions about the October 8th decision, the decision to open the entire island. I know that there's a lot of back and forth about what is appropriate tourism at this point. How did you come to that decision? Why October 8th? And for those people who are in the comments who say that it's too soon, what do you say to those folks?
A lot. First of all, I understand where anyone's angst might be. My heart is with everybody who are with me on this decision or not. Let's go back for a moment into the past. Let's go back to COVID for a second. In COVID era, you remember we were wishy-washy about when we were opening, when it was going to be safe to open. Did each of the counties have a say? Did they all want to open on different dates and in different capacities? And it was terrible. It was a terrible approach because people on the mainland have to have some understanding of what we're actually doing, and the people in Hawaii have to have a similar expectation that we're leading together, that we are one ohana. I learned that lesson very clearly as Lieutenant Governor and the person that was helping manage our COVID response. Now, this decision, a couple people have said, let me just be real clear, a couple people have said that we didn't get input. That is not true, and I'm a little bit disappointed that the council person over on Maui said that, because we held a meeting with 200 individuals who had either lost their home or their boat or their business or, God forbid, one of their loved ones. They told us almost unanimously, I mean, like well into beyond 90%, that they had to reopen, even if just gently, because it's only going to be a gentle reopening when you really look at how many people will come in October. We're expecting 20 or 30% of the regular traffic coming into West Maui. But otherwise, if we don't open or if we're not clear, it'll be many months out before people understand on the mainland what can happen. When we open on October 8th, which is exactly 2 months after the tragedy, so people can understand that, and I announced it 1 month after the tragedy, people can understand that, they will be able to respond professionally. They can gauge how many people are appropriate at the hotels. They can gauge how many workers that they can gradually bring back. Because anyone who's saying, oh no, don't bring people back, well, I would ask them humbly to look in the face of a family that's lost everything and all they've got is their job. And maybe they're staying at the hotel that is life-sustaining for them. Those people need some hope. And all of Maui needs to have clear messaging to the mainland. Otherwise, people won't go to Kihei. They will not go to Wailea. That was a problem that we experienced. I happen to have had enough experience to have seen what you have to do. So that's the basic reason. I'm not expecting a full number of tourists. I wouldn't imagine that could happen for many months. We're going to see a significant downturn. But remember, our recovery in the state is going to be predicated on how well we do in Maui. As you know, the Council on Revenues dropped our revenue for the next 2 years by about $500 million. And they dropped first our projection of growth from 4% down to 1.3% for this year. That cost us $315 million. And those are dollars that would be spent on fire personnel. Those are dollars that would be spent on building the new school. Those are dollars that would be spent on food support that I just described to you. So you can't look at this in such a single-minded way. You have to look at it broadly of what will happen for all the people of Maui, all the people of the state, and also from the perspective of what the global community understands. Tough decision, I believe the right decision, and what it will mean is we'll recover a little bit faster, and that means a lot to me.
You know, when we're talking about some of these hotels and in West Maui, a lot of these hotels are right now serving as hotels and housing for those who have been displaced. And so when you sort of reopen the doors on October 8th and the areas of Ka'anapali, say for instance, are open once again, how are you going to logistically manage the hotels between visitors that are coming in, but also residents that are now calling these hotels home?
Brilliant question. So one of the challenges, and I don't think that some people understood this, and I wouldn't expect them to because this is not their job, is that September 29th is the date at which we're really expected to transition most people into longer term housing, that being Airbnbs. It was actually 2 weeks before, and we're very thankful to Bob Fenton and all of the people over at FEMA. I asked them, and they were very good to us, to extend that for 15 days, and they did. Now, having said that, that extra 15 days where we get basically full coverage only goes so far. Yes, there will still be some people at the hotels. Right now, as of this morning, we had 7,282 people in 32 hotels across West Maui, and a couple of them peppered through other parts of Maui. And we had 1,100 people in Airbnbs. We need to flip that. We need to get about 7,000 people into Airbnbs, which we're going to negotiate a very good rate, over 100% of the baseline rate that people would get from a rental. And we'll keep some hotels because we want to have a cushion so that no one becomes homeless. we need to do that because the hotels are very expensive. They are also the lifeblood of the economy. And though they're very convenient for those who work there, eventually there will be a tension between people who are recovering, who have gone through incredible trauma, and the experience that we're trying to convey, which is that Hawaii is welcoming like it always has been to people. So that will flip. It won't be complete. There's no way I can get all 7,282 people into Airbnbs. Not even our team that's done very well with this can achieve that. But I do hope and expect people understand that we have to move forward at some point. And there will never be a perfect time. We will still be mourning for years. We will still be looking for some of our lost loved ones like we did in 9/11 for years. But we will grow. We will rise up again from these ashes in Lahaina. We won't build in Lahaina for probably a very long time, but we will restore our economy and we will restore hope to those who actually still live there.
I want to ask you about the New York Times reporting that is showing that China is somehow being part of a misinformation campaign. The Honolulu Star-Advertiser writing a follow-up piece on that. Just what is your reaction to that, sowing that kind of discord in our community? And are there specific rumors or online disinformation that you have seen that then affect how you can do your job?
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of disinformation at every level. I'm sure we'll talk about the domestic disinformation too. I'm disappointed that any country would take advantage of a people during a time of crisis. I don't accept that. Unfortunately, we live in an era where people can use artificial intelligence, they can seed stories, they can suggest nonsense, and there is always a small part of the population that will buy almost anything that you tell them. That's unfortunate. It's not a lot of people, but when you start talking about laser beams and heat rays coming from space that would take out people in Maui, come on, let's get real. But believe it or not, that kind of story gets spread around, and they take advantage because, for example, there was some ambiguity in people's minds as to how many people were ultimately going to be deceased. That was because, of course, we had large lists of people right after the fire broke out. Over 3,000 names were reported to the FBI and to the American Red Cross, and to me, for that matter, on my cell phone. But that number, of course, was going to also drop very significantly once we recovered and once we found out the extent of the fire. But they used that to sow discontent and doubt, suggesting to our own social media types that there were thousands of children gone, or that we would want that. It's disappointing. The world has to get better, is what I would say about that. I will take that up at the highest levels. I'm in constant contact with the president, and he and I are aware that some people have not been good players when it comes to our recovery.
I want to circle back on something that you just mentioned in your last answer about the length of time that it's going to take before anything is built on Lahaina. Before anything is built, there's that cleanup process that, of course, has to take place. We've heard reports of just how toxic it is and how it has to be handled very carefully. At this point in time, with the cleanup process in mind, who's really leading that, and how is the state ensuring that and monitoring this progress to make sure that it is done correctly, knowing that there are so many different toxic elements involved?
It's a pretty big job right now. So that is a very good place to describe what the challenge is. So here we go. It's going to take over 3 months to get the toxic chemicals, the initial freon and coolants and propanes and heavy metals out of there. The EPA is already in. As of this morning, they were already done. I refer to my notes, forgive me. They were done with 433 parcels out of about 1,500 home parcels. So they're going to go through over the course of 3 months, and then they'll get to businesses. But that's just the first part. Now they're doing it in a combination of FEMA. They're doing it with the EPA. We have 25 cultural practitioners because we're very, very thoughtful and mindful of EV, which implicitly are there after we've lost some loved ones. So we have a big team. We also have the police and fire folks around all the time. So that is going on. After that comes to a close, or even phases of it come to a close, we'll be able to get people back in there to see their properties. Because the ash itself is somewhat toxic, we're going to have people probably put booties on, probably put some protective cover on like PPE so that they don't breathe in a lot of what is if it's disturbed, quite toxic. If you're just walking down the street near the properties, it's okay. But it's not okay if you're disturbing the dust and it's up in your lungs and your upper airways. So starting very soon, as early as actually tomorrow, people will begin to make reservations for the list to get into the property. So in the coming weeks, people are going to be back on their properties to see it, to say goodbye to certain things, to mourn a little bit, to maybe check and search and sift with help to see if they can find something that was precious to them. I'm going to give people fair warning. It's pretty well destroyed. So, brace yourself for that reality. But so they'll be starting very soon, and then it'll roll through these many zones where people over the course of about 3 months will go in. Then we begin the much larger debris question, and that's a 9-month process at least. That is going to be removing pretty much all of the extra ash and soot and debris and wire and metal and everything, so that people end up with essentially flattened parcels again. And that's a $1.5 billion job that will be paid for mostly by the federal government, maybe a small part by us.
Tell us a little bit more about that reservation system. How are you going to prioritize folks? Is it a first come, first serve? Do you have to prove that you were a property owner or a renter? And some people, of course, don't have documentation. So how are you going to sort through all of that?
So that's going to be the prerogative of FEMA and the fire folks over on Maui. And they have to be very careful about that because we have to honor people's properties. So yes, they will have to show some form of ID, but it can be an ID that they have recently gotten. When people give their social security number, they're getting new IDs, which of course are in systems so we can reproduce an ID. We'll be careful about that. But there always is a little bit of concern, fraud, and whatnot. So we will do that very carefully. It'll be based on, I believe it's going to be more or less north to south is the way they're clearing the properties right now. And they're doing it, like I said, based on these grids. There's a lot of different grids. I can't recall exactly the number. It may be 30 or 40 grids. And as they go through them, they will know what the addresses were, and they'll be able to double check what addresses people had.
So it'll be street by street, essentially, not necessarily the entire town. If you lived on street XYZ, you can make a reservation and come in, and they do that in a process, basically.
Right, kind of like block by block. And when I say it's not like your traditional block party kind of block, it's like a certain amount of area that they were able to clear. And they have to be very careful. They have to be careful that it's the right weather, although the weather's pretty tame right now, thank goodness, because we don't like to see if the debris is up in the air, it will be more difficult to keep people healthy and safe. But it'll be pretty expeditious in its process. I'm sure people are going to have very different expectations. Some people want to just go and see their property and say goodbye. Other people may want to spend several hours there. We intend to have people there to support them emotionally in case they've lost a loved one and they're saying goodbye. We will have we'll have clergy and we'll have support that way, and behavioral health. It's a very organized and detailed process to help people recover this way.
As we talk about some of these properties for these property owners, when they're looking forward towards the future, obviously right now there have been programs and support that are covering mortgages where they're not having to pay any of these, monthly payments of mortgage payments. But that's going to come to an end at some point in time. How do you foresee for those who have lost property and will return to basically nothing to continue to pay for mortgages, but also potentially having to pay for rent now that they've been displaced? I mean, is there something that the state is looking to do to help offset some of these costs for these individuals who are paying for these mortgages but have no access or ability to do anything on these land?
Yes, there is. So some of the early grants are really just to get you through a couple months. Even though $30,000 may sound like a lot of money, it will go fast, especially if they have to get a used car or if they have to get that first and last. Now, very few of these individuals, if any, are going to have to pay any rent for a long time because the combination of either FEMA support, and they do that either through direct payment or through essentially stipends to pay what you were paying in rent, they'll be covered. Those who didn't have the luck of having FEMA eligible lifestyles, we're going to support them with the same kind of money, but through the Red Cross, and that's for 18 months also. And then, of course, through the Hawaii Community Foundation. Now, a lot of people are going to get insurance, and The problem there is that some people are going to be underwater. And so there are some programs. I did authorize $20 million just quietly. I didn't intend to talk about that today because some of the details are still forthcoming. There was $20 million of support that had remained from the COVID era to help do exactly this, to pay people's mortgages, to pay some rents that they could otherwise not afford because they were displaced. So that money is now going to go to the county of Maui. And we're grateful to those who worked on the project on Oahu before. And now that money is going to be in the hands of those who, through like MEO and others on Maui, are going to be able to do that. And that will go, fairly far too. Long term, those who have had significant loss are going to the best extent possible, be supported. There will be lots of litigation. There will be lots of settlements. All of those things are just realities, and I want to take them on straight away. I want everyone to know that we'll do all that we can in good faith to get resources to people, because these are our people. What I don't want to see is a lot of the money go away to the mainland. We could talk about that later, but that's important to me.
There's a lot of conversation happening in the comments right now about rebuilding and what's appropriate and what's not. Some folks saying, they shouldn't be rebuilding so close to the shoreline. I know you outlined what you're going to be having for those long conversations, but Annette Ortiz, for instance, once people want to rebuild in their land, it's not your choice. So how do you balance that? Because there will be a myriad of opinions. You saw that just with what happened, the October 8th decision and the tension there. How will you get folks to speak with one voice on this?
Well, it won't be one voice. There's no question. But let's talk about what we do know. First of all, the mayor of Maui, Rick Bisson, who's really working hard. I want everyone to do what they can to be supportive right now as we go through this recovery phase. Of him and his team, many of whom lost their homes also. I want everyone to try to come together. He's going to have to guide that process. There are going to be discussions. It's not appropriate for me as the governor to have those and host those discussions. I think it has to be at the local level. I'll be there to be supportive as required, as requested, but he's going to have these discussions. Now, a couple realities. For one, we were not going to build, no matter what happened in the future, super close to the water, because we have some global warming concerns, we have sea level rise, all of which is very relevant right now, obviously. So when they do new permitting and so on, that will be considered. Okay, that'll be considered. We'll do what we can to make people whole if they were already on the water or near the water. Beyond that, yes, some people do own properties, they own houses. They will have the right to build or sell. That will be their prerogative. But for the broader rebuilding of Lahaina, it should be the people of Lahaina who make that decision. That means larger areas may want to stay open. People will have real serious water questions, which I support them. That may not be evident in their minds right now based on me trying to build housing across the state. I want us to have good water policy that both helps us build, protects culture, and protects against fire. So that's a larger question too. But the community will decide how much of it is memorial, how much of it is open space, and how much of it is just necessary for housing.
Okay, we've got a lot of more comments in here. We appreciate all of you writing in. We're going to take a short break. Spotlight Now continues right after this.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. Joining us once again, of course, is Governor Josh Green. We're continuing our discussion on Maui. One of the things, as you alluded to in just one of your answers, was just some of the numbers and the influx and just the different numbers that were being presented as far as those missing as well as those we've lost. What can you tell us about where we stand right now with those numbers, and how much do you expect things to change moving forward?
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, there are always different numbers because it depends what question you ask, right? So, as I've said a couple times, our heart is broken 115 times as of now, which is to say we've had 115 lost family members. In addition to that, you've had different ways to describe how many people are unaccounted for. But I can tell you now that number is almost exactly the same. The FBI will give us an updated number every Friday. They appear to be almost exactly at the number of police reports that have been filed with Maui Police. They're right now around 42 individuals that are still unaccounted for. And the Maui Police Department, as of this morning, had 41 missing persons reports. Now, in addition to that, out of the 115 loved ones that we've lost, we've only been able to essentially identify about half of those individuals, 61 out of the 115. Leaving 54 individuals that we haven't yet identified. I went to the place where the doctors were trying to identify people, and it's tough in some cases. I mean, that's one of the most terrible things. So, of the 42 people that the FBI are reporting still missing, I think many of those, if not all of them, are going to be a part of that 54 people that have not yet been identified. It takes a long time when you've had a disaster like we had with 9/11 or with this Lahaina fire. So that's where we are. We do expect the numbers to go up somewhat because they're going to be very careful with the physical anthropologists that are checking to make sure that we didn't miss anything anywhere in Lahaina. The search and rescue teams were very thorough. They went 2 and then 3 times through, but sometimes it's not really simple when a fire has occurred. So that's where we are. It will, I think, be a relief to society to know how many people we've lost, and it's also going to be a crushing blow once we come to that understanding that that's how many of our loved ones are gone.
You know, you mentioned the need to support Maui Mayor Richard Bisson at this time. Hawaii News Now partners with Civil Beat. They've done a lot of reporting about some questions as to where the mayor was that night of the fire, that he hasn't given, in their view, a full account of his whereabouts and what his role was in responding in real time. Are you satisfied with what you understand to be his leadership at the time of the fire?
I just can't judge him right now. You know, I don't want to judge anyone right now. He ultimately will, make a determination of whether he could have done more. I can't say that. I don't know until we've done our full investigation. But we're investigating, all of us, myself included, to see whether we could do more in the moment, in the days that followed. What comes next in the months to follow is all a part of this process. The mayor, of course, had a team that was scattered a little bit that day. His managing director for emergencies, the Maui emergency management individual, wasn't able to get back to Maui, and he will have to answer for that, and whether or not he conveyed enough information to Mayor Bisson, to the fire chief, to General Hara. Again, I don't even want to judge him. These are really complicated things. I will say that we always can do better. We all wish, I believe, that more people were alerted. The fire was ferocious. It was going over 70 miles an hour, and it was extremely hot. It destroyed all the infrastructure there while they fought other fires. That is something that happened. But should we have better systems? I do think we and the world should have better systems to alert people.
Looking forward, as we talk about how Maui recovers with just the overall economy, I was there yesterday. I saw all of those empty rental cars that are just spanned over all these empty lots, and just how really empty the town is in general. There is a push to bring more to the island to help the economy and to help tourism. One of those marquee events is the Maui Invitational, and you had stated that you had wanted the tournament to be there, but there is some talk that it might actually be relocated to Oahu. Can you give us any update about that tournament and any advocacy for that event or anything moving forward that you would want to have on Maui?
Thank you. Yes, so in fact, they're having a meeting today at 2, right after our show. together. They'll be discussing that. It does appear that we don't have an adequate facility to have the Maui Invitational this year. It probably will need to come over to, say, the Stand Sheriff. And I say that with a heavy heart because it would be wonderful to be able to have the tournament in Maui. What I have asked them to discuss at 2 p.m. is perhaps to find a way to bring some of the elite athletes over to Maui for a camp, for a slam dunk contest, for an opportunity for us to be together. It is necessary that we have a good event. We have to have all these events to help bring resources and to heal and to show the magic and beauty of people that have made it through and who may have lost someone but are still there kind of pushing and charging ahead. It's likely to be here on Oahu. I don't want to lose the tournament to the mainland. Now, obviously, in 2024, we're going to make a very big push to make sure it happens in Lahaina. And there's a lot of other things that should happen in Lahaina, sports-wise, like the golf tournament. I've told them to go forward. Go forward because those guys tend to give more money than even the NFL or Major League Baseball to society. I want those resources for our people that are suffering. I want to try to bring some of their lives back and make them whole financially. I can't bring back their lost loved ones. So look out for announcements in the next day or two. But there's a lot of things that will go forward. As we deal with the heartbreak and the tragedy on Maui, there are other things that people have asked me regarding sports. We will still build the stadium because that is going to help all of us in the state of Hawaii attract growth, have wonderful moments for our children. Some of the sports teams from Maui will participate there in the future, some from Oahu and the other islands. We have to go forward as a society, but we will do it humbly. And those are the other kind of questions that I'm often asked.
Okay. We know that your focus right now, of course, is what's happening in Lahaina and beyond, but I do want to ask you about housing because that really is your sort of signature policy. It's something that you ran on, and it's something that you focused a lot of the last legislative session on. But news broke last week, Nani Medeiros, your chief housing officer, is leaving. You attribute that in large part to some bullying that happened online. Did her resignation come as a surprise? Is this something that you knew that she was having to deal with? And tell us just, more thoughts on that.
Sure. First, it did not come as a surprise to me after I saw how the meeting transpired or the meetings transpired. I was sitting next to Nani when some of the abusive behavior occurred. It's not me saying it when I say that that's why she left. It's she and others who witnessed it. There is no place, just no place for intimidation. And that's what occurred. Her family was threatened, her fiance, his business. She was cast in a light that was based on lies. All of that happened because we let it happen in society. We let social media propagate that kind of talk. We saw it live in the meeting. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because she's a very good person who herself cares so much about Hawaii. She wants local people to have housing. Now, let me tell you this. I'm going forward. I'm not afraid, and I don't think anyone should allow themselves to be intimidated. We will look at the committee with open eyes and with a thoughtful approach. We might make some minor adjustments to make sure people do feel more included. That's okay. I agree with a lot of the statements that were made that we should be more clear that it's all about affordable housing. That's always what it was. Unfortunately, some environmental groups, which I hold very dear in general, we fight on the same fights on global warming and climate change. Well, they piled on, okay? If you watch those meetings, they piled on, impugned Nani to a great degree. Of course, they're suing me because they just don't have trust that we're trying to build housing without special treatment. We're just trying to build housing in unstick projects that have been stuck for years. And everybody out there, the whole state, the whole electorate, knows that we have not done a good job building housing for people. I defy anybody in our state to say we've done a good job and built enough housing for the last decade or two. So let's do it. And so I'm going to go forward. It may still be controversial because we live in an era where we allow ourselves to buy into these absurd controversies. But for those who attacked or demonized Nani Medeiros, that was terrible. And no one should accept them in their social circles. No one should accept that as part of what Hawaii is. That is not a spirit of aloha. That is an awful approach. So I'm, as governor, not going to tolerate that stuff.
Well, looking forward, recognizing the, as you say, online abuse that she's had to go through, and having to name another individual to take over that spot, knowing that it's going to be a critical role in this plan that you are setting forth. Do you already have someone in mind, and how do you then prepare them to go through the same thing? I mean, it's got to be a hard sell if you see somebody getting abused online. How do you convince them that this is the job for them, and do you have someone in mind that you'd like to replace?
Well, I have an approach in mind. I appreciate that question. So what I may very well do is have the committee of the whole run these meetings and have a moderator or a facilitator, because attacking a moderator or a facilitator may simply be too stupid even for people who are decidedly going to attack. There's no reason to attack when we're talking about building houses for nurses and teachers, for gosh sakes. But that may be the approach. I may very well make the meetings online so people can give their testimony, have their say, but not stand up and make big body at others. There was an obvious amount of intimidation in the room, and I witnessed it firsthand. That is not okay. I'm surprised, actually, that we didn't hear from some of the individuals who may be against an emergency proclamation. I'm surprised that those people, those very people that are fighting against this emergency proclamation, didn't stand up on the spot and defend Nani, that didn't defend others that were being screamed at. You know, we should be better as a people. We may not always agree on the issues, but there was a time not too long ago where we could disagree on issues but not threaten people. And if there's going to be threats, and if there are actual threats of violence, those individuals will have to be investigated fully, because threats against public servants, public officials, and anybody is against the law.
Well, I know you said you're moving forward, lawsuits or not, but doesn't that hamper the process now that you have to face litigation on these initiatives?
Yes and no. So here's what will happen. Those lawsuits will go forward. They will obviously not be what the people want. What the court system decides will be what the court system decides. If we've made any missteps with the emergency proclamation, I will adjust the emergency proclamation. If the emergency proclamation still results in lawsuits, which it will, because the people that are suing me simply don't want to build, let them give me a proposal, for gosh sakes. Let them give me a proposal on how to build housing. It's shameful that they haven't done that. They simply want to block housing for the purposes in perpetuity for environmental protection. Well, you're not protecting any environment if you can't help local people live here and thrive here. So let them give me a plan. They don't want to do that. So if that fails still, and for some reason the courts allow that to happen, like it has for decades now, blocking housing, then I'll go to the legislature and I'll ask them to ensconce these ideas in statute. Then those very groups will probably threaten legislators and try to convince the housing chairs and so on to not pass it. At the end of the day, if all those things happen and we can't build housing, then we will know what the bias is and what the insiders are able to accomplish against the interests of our people. I am really disappointed in people who I have historically held in high regard, as I've watched them first destroy a very good person in Nani Medeiros and then not give us a chance to do the right thing by our people.
You know, we have a lot of topics that we want to get to, so we're going to try to switch gears, but somewhat related is Aloha Stadium and the master plan. Of course, we know that Aloha Stadium, beyond just the stadium itself, also includes plans for affordable housing, but let's focus in on Aloha Stadium itself. As we have kicked off yet another U8 season, there continues to be a lot of doubt in the community about when and if Aloha Stadium will be built. You said just moments ago you're still committed to this project. What can you tell us about where things stand right now?
So some of the requests and proposals have been going through the process with the Attorney General's office. They are making sure that they advance the paperwork so that people can ultimately go to the RFP, which is the request for proposals, and then we can choose. That will, as we said, that will take a few months, and then I'm hoping we dive right in. I've been in conversations with a lot of good people that have told us that they would like to bid. They would like to come and be a part of what Hawaii can build for, in this case, it's $399.5 million, and then the housing around it. We need it more than ever. We need hope, which is what we get sometimes from sports and events and from a big housing project. As you know, we'd like to do over 4,000 units of housing right there in the area. You know, I will admit it's kind of taken a little bit of a psychological back burner over the last 35 days because, you know, Jamie and I wake up every day kind of with a tear in our eye. I mean, it's heartbreaking what happened, but we do have to go forward on housing and education and healthcare. We're announcing very big things, but they do tend to be appropriately outweighed by the need to help Maui.
Okay. I want to ask you to put your doctor hat on for a moment and react to the new COVID vaccines that are being released now. Does the state have any plans to try to have more people buy into that? What are your thoughts on that? I know that, of course, you led a lot of the COVID recovery, and now here we are again. We know that COVID numbers are rising, but the infection does seem to be less potent than it was in the past. But your thoughts on the vaccines, and if the state is going to do anything to try to boost that uptake?
Yes. So the answer is yes, we will. I still believe in vaccines. I will get the vaccine myself, the booster. In my opinion, it is totally safe, and that's what's been borne out by the research. A lot of us have already had 4 or 5 shots and without any negative effects. I know that's going to seem controversial to any number of people online. That's okay. Then don't get the vaccine if that's how you feel, if you feel that strongly about it. I'm getting it because it decreases the severity of the disease. That's what these vaccines do. It won't surprise you that I'm still tracking the numbers daily in the hospital. So as of Monday morning, we had 72 individuals that were hospitalized with COVID. We peaked recently over 100 a couple weeks ago. I was at lunch this afternoon with individuals who are helping us track that, and they're doing a very good job. Also individuals who can bring extra healthcare resources when we need them. Look, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it because people are really battered and bruised by what happened on Maui right now, and we're doing okay. You'll recall when we had the Delta variant of COVID, we peaked at 393 people in the hospital. The fact that we were at 72 and it was less severe, but they were sick enough to be hospitalized, is in general a good thing. You did see that we went over 2,000, the number of 2,000 people that have passed away from COVID-related illness. That didn't surprise me because we were hovering above 1,900 for quite some time. This is not as severe as it was before. We're not going to shut down. If it gets bad enough, we will give additional public health recommendations, whether it's certain groups would be safer with a mask on, or if we're seeing a surge in one region or another, we'll share that.
Another topic, of course, we want to get to is Red Hill. We know that the military will begin that unpacking of the fuel in just about a month now. So far through this process, as they are going through this unpacking of fuel, what are your thoughts about their response? Are you satisfied with the military's response thus far in this process, noting that there has been some bumpy beginnings with this whole process? Your thoughts and your overall satisfaction with the military's response?
Again, it has not been perfect, without a doubt. I'm still quite bitter that the leaks occurred in spite of efforts from many of us back as early as 2014 to get more accountability, to pass legislation that got blocked or killed at the legislature when I was there. That all still makes me quite angry. And then the spill, of course, they could have been more transparent about. Now, regarding the cleanup, it is in general going okay. They had to make sure that they fixed any pipes and fixed the valves so that when we do completely unpack all of these pipelines and then drain it, that we didn't have more spills. I'm not satisfied and won't be satisfied until the job is totally done, but I've insisted and received guarantees that they will be fully compliant and get all of that fuel out of Red Hill that can possibly be gotten out. I'm also a little frustrated about the PFAS, the forever chemicals. It was quite an extraordinary situation how that spill occurred. I believe there was a lightning strike and there were some other concerns, but that is the world we live in. We've lived in a world that has some of these forever chemicals to fight fires, ironically, right? And so we're I guess, attentive to what we have in society now. We have these chemicals. They're going to have to be very carefully watched. We're going to have very good epidemiologists on board to track cancers, to track risk, to track the parts per billion in our water. All these things are a part of our future. I am going to use all of this to incent, encourage, even pressure the military to be full partners with us going forward as we rebuild, as we find other water sources, as we look at their leases going forward. And I hope to find a full partner in them because they have a lot on the line too. We all care about America. We all care about Hawaii's protection, but we are keenly aware that they've let us down in a few ways.
I want to circle back just because there are so many questions in the comments about renters on Maui, and a number of people saying that they are renters and so they don't feel like they qualify. Ann Williams saying, I do not qualify for FEMA, and the Red Cross is not helping me either with a replacement rental home. What do you say to the renters out there?
So if she was displaced, she's going to get a check for $30,000, and she's going to also actually very likely get rental assistance, but through different channels perhaps. So everyone's going to fall into a category. We hope on Monday to have a very clear chart well in advance of the 29th when we're asking people to move. We will have some latitude and some flexibility for people to stay in hotels as they need. Because you're right, there's not going to be a lot of easy to find rentals, but there's going to be a lot of in-contract Airbnbs that now go 6 months, 12 months, a year and a half. I'm not sure exactly which category she'll fall into, but people who lost their capacity to rent are still going to get support from us. It's probably going to start with that $30,000.
One of the things that, of course, during this time of this tragedy, we've also seen the community come together, and we saw a lot of healing. In fact, there was a vigil that took place earlier this month on the 1st that really recognized, of course, and mourned those who have been lost. We're going to take a quick look at some of the highlights from this day of mourning that happened just a few weeks ago.
E ului ka honua, e ului ka pai aina o Hawaii. Ike mai luna mai e. Ka koana, ka wana honua, ka ike mai luna mai e. Makua mai kalikia kalea kai. I ke ola o Lahaina, ke ola o Maui. No leila ke...
We know that you actually participated in a few of those. I want to get your overall reaction with just how important that day was, and your thoughts overall of how you kind of helped this community heal.
Well, I was really proud of people, how they came together, how people of every different faith decided to be together. That's what Hawaii is. And, Jamie and I have different faiths. A lot of the Kahu have a different approach to religion. And there wasn't a single person that I heard from that didn't feel like it was a way to begin the healing process. It came just about 3 weeks after, which of course is very, very close to the day of the disaster. I would expect that we will, over time, view August 8th as a day of mourning and a memorial day of its own kind here in Hawaii. I just love to see people sharing their faiths and asking for a moment to come together, hold one another's hands. It was special. It was something that you don't see in every state when these things happen. I recognize that the trauma that a lot of other states are going through, whether they have natural disasters, they have gun violence that wrecks parts of their culture. And in Hawaii, we come together, which is something that bodes well for us. We will come together. We will heal. We have to make sure that we do it not just because of what we experienced here during this fire and the crisis on Maui, but because we actually have to care about how we live together going forward. And that means working together on every issue that you mentioned today. No one is going to get any negativity from me if we can come together. I think you know that by now. And I would plead with people to find a place in their heart, even if they disagree, to embrace one another, to really encourage and support one another, because there's a lot of things that we need to do together if we're going to be a healthy state in the future. And that day was magical because so many people came together.
We are just about out of time. The hour goes fast. Before we let you go, just a final thought this afternoon on what we can expect going forward and how you do continue that kind of harmony that we saw on that day to extend out to these conversations that the community will be having that are going to be quite difficult.
Well, for my part, and whether or not others will fully believe it just now, know that I, in my heart, want to work with everyone because there's too much on the line. Even people that I deeply disagree with, whether it's the teams of people that took Nani down. I'm sure she wants to forgive them too. I want to forgive them. I want to come together. The individuals that would otherwise block what I believe to be necessary for our people, I'm reaching out to them. The controversies over a very good person, Kaleo Manuel, I want him and others to know that we embrace them. There really is very, very little difference deep down between most of us on what we love about Hawaii, what we want to do for Hawaii. But please don't allow the tensions of the world, the inclination to be oppositional. Don't let that become part of Hawaii. That's not what we should be. Everyone around the world seems to have reached out to us to care for us. Republicans and Democrats, every different culture. Can't even tell you how many very, very different ideologies care that Maui heals. We should do our part too and heal together.
Okay, Governor Josh Green, thanks so much for being here today. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Governor Josh Green, and thanks to all of you for tuning in and for submitting your questions. A lot unpacked there and a lot of updates that we got from the fifth floor in his office and his executive management team, and the governor himself really updating us on all that's happening there.
Yeah, you heard him really say that he can't judge what the mayor did, Richard Bisson, there on Maui on the day, and that the investigation continues. He talked about harmony and healing, some very big checks going out to survivors coming up, and just a lot of news there. If you missed any part of this, of course, you can watch it again online or listen as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll be back here next week with Mayor Rick Blangiardi. But for now, we leave you with a look at Kilauea as it continues its eruption there on the Big Island. Thanks for tuning in.